A very good evening to all the distinguished guests, trailblazers, and freethinkers. I, Himani Arora, welcome you to a webinar unlike any other, an intellectual escapade that dares to defy conventions and explore uncharted territories. Today, we gather to unravel the mysteries surrounding beyond discriminations towards unity, the Uniform Civil Code, and embark on a thought provoking odyssey that challenges the boundaries of social norms. In a world where diversity should be celebrated, where equal rights and opportunities should be the norm, we find ourselves grappling with the complexities of personal laws influenced by religion. And today, we gather to explore the untrodden path to break free from the chains of discrimination and to envision a society where unity triumphs over divisions. Prepare to be captivated by the wisdom and insights of our remarkable panelists whose voice will echo through the digital stage, guiding us towards a deeper understanding of the Uniform Civil Code and the transformative power it holds. Before we plunge into this riveting discussion, let us acknowledge the guardian of this unconventional discussion, our moderator, Kritika Padode, a lawyer by education and an educator by mind, body, and soul. Kritika is an alumnus of the National Law University, Delhi. She has represented the country in the Philip C. Jessup International Law Moot Court Competition and has been a contributor to the report of the Law Commission of India on the death penalty. She has set up IFM Law School in Bangalore and is a member of founding team of Vijaybhoomi University. She is currently serving as the youngest member on the Central Academic Advisory Committee of NSDC and the FICCI Higher Education Committee. She's a regular columnist in leading publications like Times of India, The Hindu, Outlook, etc. Welcome, Kritika. And now it's time to wear our thinking caps, open our minds, and get ready to traverse the path beyond discriminations towards unity. Over to you, Kritika.
Thank you so much, Himani, for that very kind introduction. A very good evening to one and all present. Firstly, a big thank you to the inspiring ladies at Flow Amritsar to curate this thought-provoking and insightful panel discussion. I'm quite sure, looking at the kind of turnout and the numbers we've got for this webinar, it is pretty certain that, people do want to deep dive into this topic a little bit more and actually want to know more that what is the Uniform Civil Code all about? So when I was actually working on the script and thinking of what are the questions that I'm going to be posing to this very vibrant and diverse panel that I have today, I actually stumbled upon a very progressive thought that was penned down by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And in his words, this is what he wrote. I measure the progress of a community by the degree of progress which women have achieved. And I truly think that that's going to be the essence and that's going to be the spirit in which we're going to be taking this conversation forward. We're going to be deep diving into a lot of questions, trying to actually understand that how the implementation of the Uniform Civil Code nationally will promote gender equality, social unity, secularism, access to justice, and just generally promoting progress throughout. And this is exactly what we're going to be answering through this long list of questions that we have for this panel that we have curated today. But for the audience members who are joining us, guys, you have a chance also to make sure that your questions are being answered by this panel. So please make sure, as we are going through the moderated discussion, if you have any points or if you have any thought, make sure you put it down in the Zoom chat box. And we will make sure that when we are going to have the open floor for discussion, we will actually take up those questions, right? So make sure you're listening very carefully. Make sure that you're putting down your thoughts freely, and we will make sure that we are going to pose those thoughts and those questions to this panel that is here with us today. So the format's going to be super simple. I'm going to first start with a set of moderated questions with our panelists so that you just get a little bit warmed up to what their views are and hear what their initial remarks are coming from the various domain areas that they come from. After which we are going to be leaving certain time at the end, which is going to be for an open floor of discussion. So with that, let's now straight dive into the conversation. So what I'm going to do is to make this really simple, as and when I'm going to be inviting the panelists, I'm also going to be introducing them so that, you know, it is fresh in the memory of the attendees who are joining us here today. So before we actually go into questions, I think it's really important to contextualize this discussion. And how are we going to contextualize it? We are actually going to have one of our panelists who's going to lay down what are the important highlights of the Uniform Civil Code, right? I'm sure a couple of us joining here, we might have heard of the Uniform Civil Code, may not have heard of it, or may not just know enough about it. So this is your chance to first form an initial opinion about what the Uniform Civil Code is. And that's what our first panelist is going to be doing for you. We have joining us Mr. Lakshit Mittal. Mr. Lakshit Mittal is a graduate of PEC Chandigarh. He has worked as a consultant at the National Health Authority and is now a consultant at Proc DNA. He's also the track chair for health, well-being, and sport at Y20 at G20. He's also a member of the National Policy and Research team of the Vijaybhoomi. So here's welcoming our first panelist, Lakshitji. If we could hear from you quickly, what are the important highlights of the Uniform Civil Code, and what is it that people here must know about this law?
Kritika, just let me know if I'm audible well. Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much, first of all, for organizing this, Kritika ji, Himani ji, to all the members of Flow, all the participants and my fellow panelists. Thank you so much for taking out the time and spending this time on this very, very important topic that we as a nation are deliberating upon today. Right? I'll not take a lot of time because there are distinguished speakers available here, and a lot of people from the law background have joined, and this really topic goes into the legalities. So I'll let the more experts on the topic speak about those intricacies. But what I want to highlight is the general paradigm of what UCC is about and what it isn't about. This is, I see when UCC comes to mind, there are a lot of attached notions, norms that come to people's mind. People feel that it is targeting someone. People feel that it will do something. It will try to unify. It will try to uniformize. And what exactly is it? There can be a lot of questions, right? So I just want to clarify that we'll break down this into two parts, what it is, right? So UCC, Uniform Civil Code, first of all, is an agenda to ensure equal rights. We need to understand that in this country, although we have given political, social, and economic rights to individuals, we still have a lot of differentiation in the way civil affairs work. There are some sections of the population which are necessitated to register their marriage, while there are some sections which are not. There are some sections which are necessitated to provide alimony, while others are not. There are some sections which have the mandatory 6 months schooling period before you get to divorce, before you get to leave your partner, but there are some sections which are not. But this fundamentally changes the way family norms in this country, in this culture work. This also brings in a plethora of different difficulty in adjudication of law. In the files of a lot of legal cases with the judiciary. Our judiciary is always trying to simplify, is always trying to fight these cases, and a lot of more important cases tend to be delayed, and then it is said that justice delayed is sometimes justice not served. So these are some of the things that we need to standardize, and we need to bring parity across sections. Then it is also that few sections were codified, while few sections were like to be governed by the sectarian laws. The sections that were codified had to leave the sectarian laws. They left the sectarian laws in the pursuit of a progressive agenda. So why do we need to discriminate in terms of civil affairs, in terms of civil matters? and not let the fruits of progressive agenda be available to all the people in this country. Yes, a country have always a very progressive culture. So why not let those fruits reach every person in this country, which resides in this country? And talking about culture and civilization, I want to talk about the civilizational aspect of UCC. UCC is not it is a very, very civilizational aspect in this country. I mean, we as a population have always been someone which have talked about women or giving equal rights to women. We've always worshipped women in various sectors. This is a country, this is a civilization where the disrespect to Sita to Sita Mata ensured a war between Bhagwan Ram and Ravan. Right? This is a land where the disrespect to Draupadi led to an 18-day war. It led a lot of lakhs of soldiers be sacrificed in the pursuit of justice. This is the land where Mata Gujri sent her grandsons. Mata Jitoji sent her sons to be sacrificed for the pursuit of the protection of a religion. So we are that civilization. As a civilization, these differences that currently exist in laws, they do not ensure that we remain intact to our civilizational aspects that we have inherited from our food. UCC is really at the heart of ensuring life of dignity to women. There are different inheritance laws. There are different partnership laws. So polygamy, divorce laws are different. Some have access, as we were talking earlier. Some have access to some have the right to seek divorce. Some don't, right? So these are the matters that matter a lot to women's life. These are really liberating factors to a women's life. So ensuring that codified a common law is followed across sections will really bring up the dignity of women, and it will parallelize the way we work across gender and the way law sees gender. And then, of course, UCC is a constitutional mandate. Article 44, the DPSP prescribe that the country has a UCC. The Honorable Supreme Court has in multiple judgments stressed upon the requirement and upon the need of the UCC in this country. So definitely, UCC is a matter in pursuit of constitutional mandate. With that, I want to come to the second section and what it is not. It is not an attempt to unify. I will stress on this that it is an attempt to uniform the applicable laws, the laws that are applicable to sections of the population in this country, but it's not an attempt to unify.
Lakshiji, just one request. Could you increase your volume, because I believe some people are not able to hear you very clearly. So if you could just turn up the volume a bit.
Yeah, sure. Just one second. Is it any better now?
Yeah, I think it's marginally a bit better. And don't worry, I mean, for the rest of the attendees, I am making a summary of points. So we will summarize everything that's been put forth by Lakshiji. So if you could just turn up the volume a little bit more, Lakshiji, it would be good.
Sure. So I'll continue from where I was stating what it is not, right? It is not an attempt to unify. We are a diverse country. We have a lot of diversity. We at each inch of this land, our customs change, our rituals change. So this UCC is not an attempt to unify. It is an attempt to just bring uniformity in the applicable laws. We are also a country where law takes precedence. So it is just an attempt to ensure that there is uniformity of laws and those equal laws are applicable to equal citizens. And then secondly, it is not a political program. As we were discussing, this is a civilizational aspect. This is really to bring the philosophical aspect of our constitutional into reality. So it is not a political program. We might be discussing this. This forum might be initiated or it be organized in conjunction with the political parties' youth wing, but it is not a political program. This consultation, for example, is just a way of us trying to democratize our policy making. We realize that it's the people that matter in any democracy. It's the people who shape the law for themselves. So they need to be heard. They have their voice. They have their perspectives. So the diverse perspectives should come together. The diverse perspectives should debate count the various differences that they hold and should come to a conjunctive. So it is the consultation is really focuses on these aspects. The consultation is a way to really ensure that government is not economic, that governance is not economic. It is vested in people. It is trying to bring that policy making perspective to the ground. That is what this consultation is about, and that is why this is partnering with the political party, but it is not a political program.
Absolutely. I think, thank you so much, Lakshji, for putting it in perspective. And I think, some very interesting points have been made, which are the major highlights of the proposed act, which is first is the uniformity of laws across the various communities, across the various religious communities that we have in India today, just bringing about standardization, codification of laws. So for the benefit of others who are joining us today, not many personal laws are necessarily codified, which means that there is a certain aspect of ambiguity that is attached to it about how they may be applicable. So putting a law down in the form of a code definitely is a step further towards making sure there is proper application of the law. Third is that it is a measure towards, as Lakshji said, to treat women equally across all different communities and all different sections of society. Fourth, these laws are progressive in nature. If we were to see, especially when you talk about aspects such as inheritance, succession, marriageable age, and other very many aspects that are touched upon by this act today. So definitely a lot of positives that are enshrined in the Uniform Civil Code. And as Lakshji mentioned, that it is actually mentioned. So when our constitution came into being, it was actually mentioned as one of the directive principles of state policy today, right? So what we are doing is actually just following the constitutional mandate. So some positive thoughts coming there. And with that, now I would like to bring in my next set of panelists, which I'm sure have a lot to say also on this topic. So first, I would like to introduce Dr. Vijaybhoomi Sahai, an education entrepreneur leading the most successful test prep brand in the law space. I think if anybody today is talking about law and they want to prepare for the CLAT exam, they do definitely want to enroll in CLAT Possible. She's also a visiting faculty for film studies at various universities and was nominated for the Fulbright Scholarship as well. And she has completed her PhD in a very, very interesting topic. And I know her personally, and I know that she is a true blood feminist at heart. So welcome, Dr. Sahai. So nice to have you with us this evening. Also joining me today, we have Mr. Suyash Pandey, a graduate of HNLU Raipur. He's also a leading lawyer today practicing. He's a partner at Trust Law in Delhi. He's also the track chair of Y20 at G20 and the national co-in charge of the policy research team of the BJYM. Welcome, Suyashji. Welcome to this conversation today. We are also joined by Advocate Manasa Mohan, who's joining us from Bangalore. She's a graduate of the Karnataka State Law University, and she's done her LLM in corporate laws from Sharda University. Ms. Mohan is a practicing advocate. She's a consultant at Barahe Analyticals and also a legal associate at Rare Earth Projects. She's also a political consultant and a member of the National Policy Research Team of BJYM. Welcome, Manasaji. Welcome to this conversation today. And I think the biggest question that we all want an answer to, I would like to invite Dr. Vijaybhoomi Sahai and Manasaji to share their opinion on how do they feel that how the UCC is actually a step in the direction of achieving gender equality. A lot is being said, and this is one of the strongest arguments in favor of this law today. I would like to hear from the women of today that how do you all interpret it and do you take it in the same spirit? So if we could start first with Dr. Sahai.
Thank you so much, Kritika, for all your kind words. And thank you so much, Flo Amritsar, for having me on this panel. I do see a battery of lawyers are going to follow, are going to talk after me. So might as well leave the legalese to them and maybe just bring into perspective since, certain topics, since it was stated earlier by the first speaker that it is a a civil discussion rather than anything else. Uh, now, so since we talk about gender equality, most often what happens is that, when something is discussed at the level of the state or even at the level of a small region, most of the time women are sacrificed at the altar of the state. Why this happens is because either ways you end up, harming the woman more than helping her. Because we've all heard about, the cause where you try to go help a woman you think is in distress because you are a feminist. But we must pause and stop and ask these women, what do you need that help? We are disrespecting the woman by not putting her in the picture at all. So while all the states persons, all types of stakeholders sit and discuss abortion laws, whether it is the West or the East, or let's say UCC is getting discussed, are we bringing on the discussion the women who matter the most over here? Because shuffling and jerking a woman out of what a woman has known for years, is unfair to that woman. As daughters, as very progressive daughters, my mother is a homemaker. And I, as a young feminist, as a teenager, as a college goer, I went to Delhi University, and we all march out as feminists from there. Most of the time, we end up disrespecting a mother, saying, "What have you done with your life?" But is that even fair? There are lots and lots of treatises written in the literature space for mothers and daughters. So the biggest anti-feminists are the feminist daughters who subject their mothers to this kind of, humiliation and try to rattle them out of that life, which is what they have known all through the years. So yes, while on paper we are going to discuss, in fact, I have other eminent panelists following me who will bring in the laws to this. While on paper, yes, it is a huge issue on gender parity, but we must pause and remember that there is not just gender parity to discuss, there is also class parity to discuss, a caste parity to discuss. A feminist issue for an urban woman who's working, who's sitting on this panel for Flow Amritsar is not the same concern for another woman who faces hundreds of issues other than gender issues in her daily life. That is why a Western woman's concern is not the same as an Eastern woman's concern. Gayatri Chakraborty's Spivak, who I hold in high regard, has written so many papers talking, and hundreds of other Indian feminists have written so many papers, saying that Western notions of feminism do not work with us. We have huge issues, and race is another issue that we are facing, which you are not facing. So similarly, as we go down the ladder, we must ask ourselves, is equality the same as uniformity? We are talking about a uniform civil code. Are we saying that it will be equal for every woman? Are they two similar things? Why, for me, a uniform civil code may not matter so much, because probably I'm married into a household where I will not be left on the road to lurch, whether it's a Sharia law or a Shastra which is against me, but the same will not be true for other women. But we must remember, before we jerk them out of a life, what are we there to offer them? What have we there? Do we have alternatives? So some of the times our philanthropic, movements and gestures actually sort of devastate the lives of these people whom we really do not understand. So these are the questions that the lawyers, the people behind these, the statespeople, the politicians have to answer. Another concern is that simplifying, which has always been used with UCC, it will simplify laws, it will simplify justice. Simplifying is something which I'm really against. A country which is so layered, where 5 kilometers of the country are so dissimilar to each other, how can we just simplify it? Because the UCC has repercussions not just for two big religions in our country, which is Hinduism and Islam, but they have huge repercussions for people in the Northeast. They were promised something during the British Raj. The Nagas have their own concerns. So simplifying cannot be one of the promoters for this code. And again, my main concern over here is in the talk of gender parity, is uniformity the answer to gender parity? Because parity is a very subjective issue. Women in India have so many class barriers. So again, it brings me to the same point. Women helping women might end up devastating them further. So the kind of woman who has to be in this discussion, the eventual stakeholder, the trickle-down effect, that has to be really looked into. And definitely we need a lot of women in this discussion who have worked with those women or who represent those women, where these things are layered. And finally, the first speaker said it's not a political thing, it should not be politicized. I strongly stand against, with all due respect, against this view, because I think every word that I have uttered has a political connotation. It can't not have a political connotation. Everything that is going to be spoken today will have a political connotation. Everything that we do, every act of ours, if it is a part of social and a civil code, has to be a part of the political code. Because without it, we don't exist. Then why are we even discussing? This entire act is a political act, So I think politics is not a dirty word. We should politicize issues as long as we are able to find some kind of solutions. And those solutions, in all our good intent, should not be damaging. We have to understand the intricacies and layers that are involved over here. We can't go ahead with philanthropy but end up doing the opposite. It can't be a quixotic thing, because it's a huge country at stake. And at the end of every big political or civil churning, the woman, the third genders, all the other transgenders are the ones that suffer. So while these laws are patriarchal, the UCC itself can also be a very patriarchal act in the garb of bringing gender parity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sahai. I think some very interesting and very pertinent questions you have posed through your response. Well, firstly, and I think very importantly, that are we engaging with all sections of women, right? Also those who may not come from privileged background, across all castes, all communities. Are we really going down to the rural areas and having a conversation with them? Because a law like this definitely is going to question a lot of the conditioning that they have gone through all their lives. The second is also that, equality being same as uniformity. I mean, I think that is also a very important question that you have, raised today before this panel. And truly, is simplification an answer for a country as diverse and as, I would say, different like India? I mean, we know we are totally a melting pot of different kinds of communities, cultures, religions. So the fabric of India is very complex. So very, very pertinent questions raised by Dr. Sahai. Let's move to our next panelist, inviting Ms. Mohan. We would like to hear your views on whether you think this is a step forward towards gender equality. And also, if there are any of the questions that have been raised earlier, if you would like to, give your view, support, or probably an answer to those questions, we would love to hear that from you. Also, for the viewers joining us, please make sure you're watching the polls. There are some very interesting polls that are also being run simultaneously for our attendees today. So please make sure that you're tuning in and putting in your responses to the polls as well. Perfect. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kritika ji. And thank you so much, Dr. Sahai. It was very insightful to hear your thoughts on it. But firstly, I heard that you spoke about politicizing it. And secondly, about the people who have been into the field and who have understood. And thankfully, I feel that I am eligible in both the categories because firstly, I'm a woman and I'm also a political consultant, and I also run an NGO simultaneously, which works for underprivileged kids and orphan kids by providing them education. So I hope me stating facts right now would be the most appropriate way to clear this issue out. So starting off, when we speak about gender equality and how UCC is going to promote gender equality, I think two things are the major issues that we will have to pinpoint when it comes to the view of UCC. Okay, the first one will be, should polygamy or bigamy or polyandry for that matter must be regulated in all the religions, or they have to be prohibited in all the religions? And secondly, it is the grounds for divorce, the waiting period to finalize a divorce for any religion for that matter, because these things are mainly taken care by the personal laws. So firstly, UCC is not uniforming people, but it is uniforming laws, uniforming personal laws. So this is my view on it initially. So speaking about the polygamy, polyandry part of it, this is a very ancient tradition that was followed across the world, and it included India too. And this started with the kings, where they married multiple women to strengthen their lineage, and to make sure that they have a kid to um, take forward their kingdom. But the same thing also was reflected among the common men. And in the 19th and the 20th century, it took a very bad shape. And that is when most of the personal laws, like the Christians, Parsis, and the Hindu personal laws, realized that, okay, this is not right. Then we will have to regulate this. We will have to prohibit this. And the Parsi Marriage and Divorce Act, or the Hindu Marriage Act for that matter, and the Christian Marriage Act prohibited this tradition. But the Muslim Marriage Act and the Muslims in India, who are nearly 15% of the nation's population, are following the Muslim Personal Law Board's provisions, or the laws that are made by the Muslim Personal Law Board, which are mostly uncodified. So this allows Sharia provision, allows the Sharia provision followers to marry up to 4 wives. A man can marry up to 4 wives, and he is not subject to incrimination to have the 5th wife too. And unfortunately, in I would like to quote this. Unfortunately, in Ray Muslim Women Quest for Equality, the affidavit provided by the same board specified that polygamy is a social need and blessing for women, because an unlawful mistress is more harmful for the social fabric than a lawful second wife. So they say that an unlawful mistress is more harmful than a lawful second wife. So this, if a person who thinks this way, or a committee that thinks this way, can take over the women of their community and say that we are going to help you grow, it is I really don't know what to say about it. It is very scary, to be honest. And today in the 21st century also, like major Muslim nations like Turkey and Tunisia have banned these practices of polygamy and polyandry. However, this has made women suffer so much along the years. Women have lost their dignity. Women have lost their fundamental rights. They have not been enjoying their legal rights over here. And a 2020 study of the Bharatiya Muslim Mahila Andolan also gave us the exact number that nearly 84% of Muslim wives want this practice to be prohibited. So this shows that there are more than 84% of Muslim wives who have directly or indirectly been a victim of polygamy. So I think it is high time we take a stand for UCC, which is ready to make this practice, which is ready to regulate this practice or prohibit this practice for that matter. And we are all aware that anyway, the Article 25 says that you have a right to follow your religion, you have a right to follow your faith. But the Supreme Court also specified in one of the cases, that is Khurshid Ahmed Khan versus State of UP, that you can follow your religion, but not at the cost of health and morality of another person. So I think we have to keep that in mind over here and follow the same thing. Speaking about the second thing that I wanted to say, that is divorce, grounds of divorce, and how it is happening. one of the most dreadful practices to speak about is probably the nikah halal, where a Muslim woman is supposed to marry another guy to get a divorce from her husband, or have a sexual intercourse with another guy to get a divorce from her own husband. So these practices have to be regulated, and there is a need for women to there is a need to uplift women in this view. So uniform civil code is going to uniform all apples. It is not an apple and an orange comparison, to be honest. It is the comparison of different types of apples. Kashmiri apple को कश्मीरी एप्पल्स के साथ लगाएंगे और ऊटी एप्पल्स को ऊटी एप्पल्स के साथ लगाएंगे. This is the uniformity that uniform civil code is taking care about. The same thing applies to when it comes to the waiting period for divorce also, where Hindu marriage act says it's 1 year, Muslim says the period is for 90 days, special marriage act says 1 year, but the Christian divorce act says it's for 2 years, which is depriving the right of Muslim women to get a divorce immediately, which is causing a lot of domestic violence and harassment among the Christian women. So I think it's high time we welcome the Uniform Civil Code for this reason. I hope I've answered the questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mohan. So I think, thank you so much for giving us examples from the various different personal laws to talk about, the different practices that exist at this point of time, and which may in practice take us a step forward especially when we are trying to have conversations around gender equality. So, if, like you pointed out about divorce laws, or if today, we even talk about the marriageable age or polygamy, iddat period, etc. So thank you very much for pointing that out. With that, I would like to introduce my next 3 set of panelists. So joining us also on this panel, we have Ravina Lalit, who is a senior associate with the competition law practice at the Shardul Amarchand Mangaldas and Company. She's also a visiting faculty at the Jindal Global Law School. She has completed her LLM from the University of Cambridge as a Justice Pratibha M. Singh Scholar. A very, very warm welcome, Ravina. Thank you so much for joining us from Nagpur. We know you've had a very busy day. Thank you for taking out the time to join us. We also have joining us today Mr. Janay Jain. He is the LLM candidate at the University of Cambridge, prior to which he completed his graduation from the Government Law College, Mumbai. He will now be joining the chamber of Advocate Abhinav Chandrachud, who practices in the Bombay High Court. A warm welcome to Janay. Thank you so much for joining us. We know you're winding up at the University of Cambridge. So very nice of you to take out the time to take some time and discuss your views on this issue. And we have a very, very special, I would say, panelist who's joining us today. And I feel the voice of this generation. I think today no conversation is complete without having adequate representation from the Gen Z. So joining us today, we have Zaina Dillon, who's a student of the Invictus International School. She's a member of the National Debate Squad and has won many accolades in debating as well as writing. To name a few competitions where she has done exceedingly well, that is the London School of Economics British Parliamentary Debate, the Harvard Forensics Tournament, etc. She has also been recognized as an AP Scholar with distinction, having taken 9 APs, including those such as World History, Calculus, and English Language. So truly an achiever in many ways. Warm welcome to you, Zaina. Thank you so much for joining us and representing the views of the younger generation. So I know we've been talking a lot about the law and, how, this has actually been something which has been in the works for a long time now. So I would like to invite Ravina and Janay's opinion on this question. On many occasions, the Apex Court of India has amplified its support for the UCC, calling it an unaddressed constitutional expectation. What, as lawyers, what is your take on this? I mean, is this implementation really taking forward the constitutional mandate of the country? So Ravina, if we could start with you. Ravina, are you able to hear us? Okay, so I think there's a little bit of a technical difficulty there. So until we have Ravina join us, can we have Jane jump in?
Sure, sure. I hope I'm audible and visible to all. So I feel that there are a number of interesting facets that we can start with when it comes to the constitutional expectation of this code. So the first thing is that when our constitution was being drafted, legal luminaries in the Constituent Assembly, be it the great Babasaheb Ambedkar, K.M. Munshi, they all voiced out their support in favor of this code. However, at that time, coming from the freedom independence struggle, they realized the practical reality is that it couldn't be addressed at that particular time. And they came to some sort of a compromise where this was placed in the directive principles, which wasn't particularly enforceable at that time. But they addressed that the state shall endeavor to carry forward this view. And then we see that from the early stages of India growing in as a democratic republic till today, there have been a number of cases where the Supreme Court of India has at times even chided the government for not addressing this expectation into reality. And I feel that some of the cases are very interesting. If I could just give like a short explanation that what really happened in these cases to realize why the need for the Uniform Civil Code was voiced out by the courts. And although there are a long list of them, I feel that there are a couple of landmark cases that I'm sure all the lawyers on this panel would be very well aware of. But for the general audience, it would bode us well. I feel the most interesting case that particularly took out the need and kickstarted, we can say, a conversation about the Uniform Civil Code was what we call the Shah Bano case back in 1985. And this was a particularly interesting case because here we saw a Muslim woman who was kicked out of her household and divorced by her husband. And she approached the courts of justice under a provision in the Code of Criminal Procedure, where she basically stated that she sought for compensation because her husband failed to maintain her. And at that time, her husband, who himself was an esteemed lawyer back in Uttar Pradesh, took out another novel argument where he stated that as per the Muslim personal law, which was that he was only provided or only he needed to only provide maintenance for a limited period of time. And the Supreme Court of India, in fact, struck at the argument of the husband and stated that this code of criminal procedure was what we call a gender agnostic and a religion agnostic provision. And no matter what the religion of that individual was, he was yet to provide them and provide his wife with a particular maintenance. And in this factual matrix, the court set out and echoed the need for the Uniform Civil Code in the first place. Then we see a bunch of other cases as well, where people have tried to escape the provisions of the law by relying upon personal laws, which the Supreme Court has again struck at, and time and again voiced out its concern for the Uniform Civil Code. Particularly Justice Kuldeep Singh, as he then was the Chief Justice of India, very radically and very vociferously voted out for the Uniform Civil Code in a bunch of judgments as well. And if we see all of this, we see that there are two common themes that run through all of these cases. The first common theme that runs through is the question of gender equality. And the second theme that runs through is to marry the contradictions that exist amongst different personal laws. And I think a lot has been spoken about gender equality already. So I think I will just summarize that very shortly by giving an example of the prosperous Parsi community that comes and that is very popularly residing in Bombay. Now, the Parsi community is one where they say that the literacy rates go around 90%. And it's still shocking that today, when a Parsi female marries outside her community, not only does she lose her entitlement to all the property that she has been part of earlier, but she cannot even enter the fire temple in itself. So I feel these are some of the personal laws that have set against the position of women. And secondly, and most importantly, I feel the most biggest advantage and why the court has time and time again stressed upon the need for a uniform civil code is to marry the contradictions that exist amongst different personal laws. And the very simple question that comes up is that today, if we have the same criminal law for each and every one of us, be it a crime committed in Assam, Maharashtra, or Gujarat, from any religion whatsoever, why is it that we have different personal laws when these are matters that involve each and every citizen that we cannot even stay out of, be it marriage, succession, divorce? So I feel these contradictions are where women are really set back upon, and this is where gender equality takes its biggest blow. For example, when it comes to the Muslim community vis-a-vis the Hindu community, through a series of judgments and the court interpreting the Hindu Succession Act, women are now entitled to around 50% of the share of either their husband's or their father's property. However, when it comes to Muslim personal laws and the Sharia law, it is only 1/4 or 1/8, and those two depending on nuances. So these are the contradictions that the court seeks to iron out and therefore expresses its regard time and time again, vociferously right from 1950 to most recently in 2019 for a uniform civil code. So I think that's where my view lies on this aspect.
Thank you so much, Janev, for very effectively tracing the legal and constitutional history of the Uniform Civil Code across the various judgments, that landmark judgments, so to say, that we have had at the Supreme Court, and especially also laying down what happened in the Shah Bano case and how it was a turning point for a lot of the debate that we are having today. So moving on to Ravina, I think, Ravina, we would like you to jump in now and give us your view on how this is, firstly, do you feel that this is taking the constitutional mandate forward? Also, a lot of legal, I think, points and questions have been thrown here in this particular discussion we have had. So any of those that you would like to address, please feel free.
Thank you. I apologize. I think I'm at an airport, so I apologize in advance for bad connectivity. But just picking up from where Janai left off, I think one very important point to note that's come through is that while the Supreme Court has expressed the need to have a uniform civil code, they've respected that this is not their domain, and they've gone to great extents in other ways, and in other cases, I'll give a few examples, but they haven't gone to a full extent of actually directing that something like this be set up, or setting up a time frame, or giving guidelines like they otherwise have normally done in other situations. For example, when it came to sexual harassment at the workplace for women, they were the ones who set up guidelines, and they've done this time and time again where the need arose, including in certain environmental cases or PILs where they mandated reporting back to them. But they realized that this is an area which is purely in parliamentary domain, and therefore they have refrained from commenting beyond stressing the need to have such a code, right from Shah Bano up to the triple talaq case at least, and even a PIL that was filed in as early as last month, where they dismissed it by saying that this is not again in our domain. So I think we have to give them credit for that, because this is a sensitive topic where they get cases time and time again to decide and comment on, but they have tried to refrain to the extent possible. Having said that, we see from the judgment, some of which have been mentioned, that the court has intervened where required in personal laws to try to make sure that relief is granted in a case before it, and certain provisions are interpreted in a manner that become friendlier towards more marginalized communities, including women, where it came forth. So Shah Bano is one great example. Similarly, there was a case called John Valamutam, where basically Section 118 of the Indian Succession Act was challenged, saying that it was unfair and discriminatory against Christians because they did not have the freedom to will land for charitable and religious purposes. And on that challenge, that section was in fact struck down. Similarly, there was this case of Pannalal versus State of Andhra Pradesh, where the court actually said, and I quote, that directive principles of the Constitution visualize diversity and attempt to foster uniformity among people of different faiths. A uniform law, though is highly desirable, enacting it in one go perhaps may be counterproductive to unity and integrity of the nation. So while trying to provide relief, like in these cases, they've also tried to show some type of restraint. And we see as recently, though, in triple talaq, they had to do something to make sure that the law becomes a little bit more equitable towards women. But at the same point of time, there was a limit in terms of how far they could go, where they could have actually answered the question of UCC as well in that case, but they chose not to go into it. So that's, I think, as far as the court goes. And I think in other aspects, in terms of whether the Uniform Civil Code would bring about gender equality to begin with, I think taking from examples that we've heard throughout here, it is a big step in ensuring that women are greater represented and have greater standing and rights in terms of matrimonial property, in terms of inheritance, in terms of adoption, in terms of co-partnership really with their spouses. And it would really become one huge leap that our country would take to really put forth the rights and put forth the actions of women and maybe even other communities, depending on verdicts that we await in terms of other types of relationships being recognized. So it does definitely become a big step forward in ensuring that we have rights for marginalized communities to come and put forth and stand on stronger footing as compared to relying simply on personal laws as of now. The other aspect, I think, is already been touched upon by other panelists as well, but religion is not something that a lot of people still choose to decide. It's something that most people attain as a result of birth and family. And in our society and in our social construct, it's not something where you can easily decide to denounce a surname or change your faith or even change the practices that you follow based on the socio-economic, cultural fabric that we have. Therefore, it's very, very important that the code, whenever brought about, recognizes and respects that there are a lot of sensitivities that even Dr. Sahai had pointed out earlier. Lot of sensitivities around cultural practices and norms, etc., which need to be respected, and the code should clarify the aspects which it will cover and the aspects that will be excluded as well in a more clear-cut manner, I think, to bring more relief to those sections of society that are opposing it, so that they can realize the benefit of the legislation and support it and give critical feedback to enhance it, rather than trying to just shun it down due to misinformation or lack of knowledge. I won't get into it more further because of lack of time, but this is I hope this covers the questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ravina. Firstly, thank you very much for making it also clear what the stance of the court has been and how the court has also been treading very cautiously on matters of personal laws. Second, also, I think a very well-received opinion, and I think it's also very well-received in terms of the poll that we just ran. So 91% of the attendees think that, implementation of the Uniform Civil Code is actually going to be a step toward gender equality. So how, a lot of ancillary rights, which probably do not exist for a lot of women today, would be recognized and would be rights which they can enforce, and not only in the area of marriage or divorce, so to say, but for partnership, adoption, succession, inheritance. So also a step towards that financial independence, which is a very big question today that lingers in the mind of a lot of Indian women. So thank you very much for putting that very, very strongly and very, very accurately before our audience today. Let's move, I think, our attention now to our Gen Z representative. We want to hear from you. What does the generation of today think about implementation of the Uniform Civil Code? There are the youngsters with us. What is their knowledge domain on this particular area, and where is it that the youth is leaning today? So over to you, Zaina.
Thank you so much, firstly, for having me here. I must say this is such a wonderful platform, and it is such a great initiative to give the youth that agency to have their voice heard. So just firstly, thank you for having me and for hosting such discussions. So specifically now, I think first an overview of what my opinions on this, and I think what generally the youth feels about this, before I respond to I think some of the very interesting conversations that have happened before, and then some substantive material that I want to add to the discussion. A disclaimer though, I am less than half as qualified as these esteemed panelists who are with me, so I shall try my best. But I think the overview for me is, I think the Uniform Civil Code was definitely a long time coming. I think it is definitely something that can solve so many of the issues that we face. It's not a panacea for sure, but issues with the lack of gender parity, generally with inequalities between different religions and the ways in which we deal with different laws, it's definitely something that's very important there. I honestly think that had the Rajiv Gandhi government, for instance, not propped up the Muslim Women's Act, which ironically, of course, undermined many of the rights during a divorce that the Shah Bano judgment had guaranteed for women, the Uniform Civil Code could very easily have already been a reality. I think three things to which I want to respond, three important things that came out of the discussion so far. The first is of the idea of whether uniformity is the solution, is having the simplification of laws, is this uniformity really the best way to ensure gender parity? And I think here it's important to contextualize this, because it is the alternative that is often worse. Given the choice between uniformity versus the alternative, which I'll get to in just a second, I'd argue that the uniformity is definitely a much better solution. The alternative currently, or in general, is obviously to have religions reform themselves. The UCC is an attempt by government, by law, to, in my opinion, reform religion. The alternative is for religion to attempt to reform itself. As many of us would agree, it is often very hard to bring about that change from within religions. So it is at the point at which religion fails to evolve that we have things like the UCC come in and bring in those much needed changes. It has obviously been millennia and just decades and decades and years and centuries since religions have existed, but the lack of reform so far definitely means that the Uniform Civil Code is something that's needed to bring about all those changes. The second thing I think is about the idea of whether or not this is something that needs to be politicized in general, whether it is a political issue. And so the idea of being a political issue versus politicization, I think definitely, as far as people can have different views on it, this is a political issue. But to the extent of politicization, I think that is a slippery slope. At the point at which this becomes about different political parties, it is very hard to have a civil discourse, because it is at that point that it becomes about party lines and ideologies rather than just the merits of the policy in itself, which I think definitely the UCC has. But thirdly, then an important discussion on what's been problems with specific religions. And I think this goes back to the implementation of the Uniform Civil Code as well. Often the problem with pointing out specific problems with specific religions is that it becomes very hard to implement it, given that there's a lot of backlash, right? And this is something I'll get to later. But the primary argument against the Uniform Civil Code also, I think, in much of popular discourse is the idea of backlash that it's likely to get from religions. I think when you point out specific religions for the problems they have, obviously in the context of India, we know the kinds of religions that are pointed out. It becomes very hard then to actually implement this, even if it is very beneficial for people of those religions. Two things then that I want to add to the discussion, separate from the discussion that's been had so far. I think the first thing then is a way up that needs to be had over the short-term backlash, which is obviously, I think, the primary argument against the Uniform Civil Code versus the long-term advancement of women's rights. I do think that the gender parity that the Uniform Civil Code can bring is one of its biggest merits in general. I think here I want to bring in the social contract, actually, a book that Rousseau writes, obviously the famous philosopher during the Enlightenment, where he talks about how societal evolution often means that religious laws can soon be replaced by progressive laws. He talks about this in his own context, where Calvinist laws, so a section of Christianity at the time, Calvinist laws were often very rigid and there was backlash. But it was through the centuries of evolution, it was through the uniformity that was imposed in laws that eventually the backlash died out, and then generally society was more progressive. I think the idea then being that obviously whenever there's a new policy, there is backlash in the short term. There are always people who will oppose it, but it is very important to be far-sighted and to know that given that this policy can have so many benefits in the long term, it really doesn't matter if there are a few conservatives who will be opposed to it in the status quo. And obviously the fact that there's a few conservatives who will oppose it, but it is the majority of, say, the women who suffer who matter far, far more. Lastly, then, on this second idea, which is where I'd also want to briefly talk about the Shah Bano judgment, which I think has been so extensively discussed already. But just the idea that given the backlash after the Shah Bano judgment, it was conservative sections of society that often protested, but it was Muslim women on the ground who fought against the overruling of the Shah Bano judgment that happened. It was Muslim women who say Shah Jahan, a famous Muslim feminist at the time, famously protested in front of the parliament in New Delhi, saying that if Muslim women were not treated like citizens of India, that if they were to be subject to religious law in the absence of the judgment, then they might as well go ahead and form a nation of their own. They might as well form an Auratstan, obviously, a land for women. So I think to conclude this discussion then, or to conclude my 2 pennies in this discussion, I think in the long term, the Uniform Civil Code means that given the diversity in India, people from different religions have religious freedom, but also that women in particular have a right to freedom that is independent of the diktat of religion.
Thank you so much, Zaina. Those are very articulate opinions, I think. And I think you very rightly pointed out that I think it's important for all of us to see this largely from the stronger narrative of, initial backlash versus what is going to be the progressive advancement in the years to come. And that is more important, sticking to that particular positive side of the thought. And thank you very much for, actually very articulately putting forth those opinions and backed by some extensive research. So I think kudos to you for that, for doing that for us. I see we are running out of time. So I would have to take permission from our chairperson. And I know that there's a lot to be said on this. So I think, what we can do is we had a bunch of questions lined up, but I see it's already 7:35. So if it's okay, maybe if we could have a quick from our panelists, quick concluding remarks on this discussion that they've had. I'm sure, with other panelists speaking, there would be other thoughts that must be zooming in our mind that we would like to put it out there for food for thought. So I would quickly like to invite my other panelists, if they have, what is their last line? What are the last few words that they would like to give? So let's start with you, Ravina. We know you're at the airport, so let's quickly hear from you.
Thank you. I think last words are just echoing what everyone discussed here. We need a code which is going to be forward thinking and tuned to society today, tomorrow, and day after, rather than sticking into things of the past. Having said that, it also needs to be very, very sensitive to the socio-cultural fabric of our society, and the code must clearly, or governments must clearly specify what is in the ambit and what is not, and make sure that certain customs or sensitive aspects of religion and culture are not encroached upon to cause dissensitivity. And it's only the more crucial aspects that actually will lead to empowerment and change that are prioritized, to make it easier, to make it more digestible as a pill for society to swallow and move ahead with as well.
Thank you so much, Ravina. Thank you. Quick last words, Dr. Sahai.
So I think I would go with the same conclusion as Ravina's. As I stated in the beginning, you can't jerk people out. Of course, we have had so many changes. We've codified some personal laws also. So we have taken those progressive steps. So, but what we did was we forgot to continue doing the same. The pacing did not happen. So yes, we have to be sensitive. We have to look after the marginalized and the minorities that we are trying to protect. And unfortunately, women still, any action against women is still considered affirmative action. So definitely we are still on the margin. So with sensitivity, with sensibilities, we need the code, definitely. But yes, it should be towards parity more than uniformity. So parity, as I have always maintained, is different for different women, the different classes, not individuals. So we have to be sensitive towards all of that and take into account the diversity. So the code is definitely needed, but it has to have a whole lot of planning. And as Ravina said, the government has to be very clear on what is in the ambit and what is not, what can be touched, what cannot be touched, so that people have time to digest, chew, and everything. Thank you.
Absolutely. Janay, your word on it.
I feel the biggest advantage of a uniform civil code will be that we've seen women who have gone to court as individual litigants to seek justice, and the courts have meted out justice to them. But there are a large host of women who, owing to various problems, have not been able to go to the courts to seek justice. So I feel a uniform civil code will kind of make it justice for all. It will deliver upon a constitutional premise rather than forcing women to go to courts as a last remedy to get answers. And secondly, I feel it will largely benefit the citizenry, because these are matters with which we all deal with day to day, and even legal minds struggle with the complex nuances that are there. So we need a uniform civil code that is not only simple and succinct, but it's also straightforward, so that each and every person, no matter what their level of education is, can comprehend upon the same. So I feel these are the cornerstones upon which, and the most important thing would be a consensus. There should be a consensus when this law must be drafted. So I feel these are just some of my closing thoughts on this aspect.
Wonderful. So, while we have all been discussing as panelists, I've been seeing Suyash very diligently make notes. And, a lot of us have spoken about the fact that, it's very important that, especially when you are, looking to implement an overreaching law like this, that it's important for us to have as many discussion forums as possible to be able to engage with different groups and try to be able to understand that what are the larger issues that they are going to be facing and how we can ease this transition for them and also make sure that all the interests are being looked into. So with that, I would like to actually invite Suyash ji and, like him to give us, the whole conclusion, the way forward and what his extensive, sort to say, opinion would be on this whole process, on the whole dialogue that we have had, and how, constantly there are a lot of engagements that are being done with different sort of groups to be able to incorporate as many views and as many perspectives as possible. So over to you.
Thank you, Kritika ji. I have 3 to 4 minutes.
Yes, please feel free.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, Kritika ji, and all the esteemed members of Flow Amritsar and other participants. I would like to start with pointing out that wisdom has no age. It doesn't come with age. This was proved by our youngest panelist today. But the kind of understanding that she has presented here in something I think worth recognizing, and very good to see the Gen Z taking ahead. Now, I'll not take much of your time, but I'll just press on those issues, the myths, the questions, or the uncertainties that were also pointed out during the discussion, and also those aspects which we should understand in relation to the UCC. If we are talking about that UCC is an attack or is something, an imposition on a set of religions, or it is actually a target or a political issue. So we should understand that countries like Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, and Tunisia, these countries they don't allow polygamy. Oh, sorry, they don't allow their women to get married before the age of 18 or 19 years. In India, you are giving a right to one set of religion to get their daughters married under the age of 16 years. Another, you are saying that it should be raised to 21 years. Whether this type of disparity is mandated by our constitution, is it mandated by our constitution makers? We should ask how we can bring this kind of parity and uniformity. Then polygamy, the ill effects of polygamy and what all things are related, what are the views of the stakeholders on it have been told about the previous speakers. I'll tell you that in countries like Turkey or Tunisia, they don't allow polygamy. There is no doubt when it comes to regarding the women. So we are much ahead. We are a more open and a civilized society than many of these nations. Now the second thing is the biggest question that is coming up with: will it bring an end to the customary practices or rituals or the belief system? See, religion is one thing. The personal laws, its accommodation in the society is altogether a different thing. The government has already clarified that the tribes in the Northeast, which have been given an exception till now regarding the uniform laws, so they will be exempted in the same manner because the grounds of exemption are different. The grounds of exemptions are more based on their civilizational aspect, their origin, their difference or diversity from the mainstream society. But in a mainstream society, for a person living in Amritsar, in one home you are allowing, can you allow 4 marriages in another home in the neighborhood? You say that no, you cannot practice bigamy or polygamy. So that should not be compared to the tribals, that the exception that is given to one set of community in a remote not I'll say remote, but in a dedicated part of the nation, it is different from the general community. So it will not bring an end to the customary practices. I'll give you an example. Before the Hindu Marriage Act, how the marriage used to be performed in majority of the Hindu families through with the Saptapadi taking 7 vows. That was one of the recognized practice. In Sikhs, Anand Karaj is one of the recognized practice. After the advent of the Hindu Marriage Act, have these practices abolished or uniformed by the government? No, that will not recognize this marriage. If you do Saptapadi, these are still recognized. The Arya Samaj marriage is still recognized. In the same manner, the practices or the rituals, how a marriage will convene, how you will take a divorce, will not be regulated to a very large extent, but there will be you can say check of the constitution by the constitutional provision that it does not become discriminatory for any of the individuals. The third thing that I would like to talk about is there is a thing that let the communities reform, let them prepare themselves. A consensus should be built. Mansa ji told about the views of the stakeholders of one community. Let's talk about the other communities or other experiences. If we would have not got sati, a law for sati to abolish the practice of sati, whether we would have been succeeded in abolishing sati in a shorter span of time at that point of time, this is a question that we should ask ourselves. Our society, we have different kinds of people, but there has to be some regulating measure to actually control and do away with the discriminatory practices. By not having a UCC, you are exposing a set of women in a very systematic manner to the discriminatory practices. Means you are saying that, oh, we are a very secular nation, or we accommodate diversity, and due to that diversity, these particular set of women are not entitled to maintenance. The husbands of this particular set of women can give them divorce without their permission, without court's intervention. But these women cannot ask for divorce without taking a permission from their husband or without court's intervention. So you are allowing women of one set of communities to contest their divorce. You are not allowing another set of communities to contest their divorce equally. So here the laws are all not. The question is not only about laws. The question is also about the remedies to avail justice, which are very different, or these are not diverse. This is discrimination. Let us accept this fact that disparity in access to justice is not diversity, it is discrimination. So we should think that exposing people to the risk of getting discriminated in a systematic, in a formalized manner, whether it is a question on a civilized society or not. Okay, I'll not take much of your time. But now I have a question for this entire gathering. The question is that we have talked about the Islamic laws, we have talked about the Christian laws and the Hindu laws. The Law Commission of India has issued a questionnaire to actually start a consultation on UCC. Okay, in that questionnaire, and also this is a very general question for the entire Hindu community and the Indian community in that sense, that women were recognized as co-partners in the year 2005. Like a daughter will be having a same right as a son in the ancestral property. Before that, it was not a right. How this particular reform was very easily brought? Because the Hindu law was codified, and then the parliament an act was brought in, a bill was brought in, it was enacted, and the rights was given to the women. But still, the question is that are women able to avail those rights? Do we need to? Does anything more needs to be done? The question is from our side as Vijaybhoomi's national policy research team to you, so that we will compile these proposals and present it to the relevant stakeholders. Okay, so this question is for the participants. Whoever you can think and you can answer it right away, or you can answer it later. The last thing that I want to talk about, Kritika ji, is very important for us. That's why we are here. That our Prime Minister, when he first came to power in 2014, one of the very first laws that he made was regarding public consultation on all issues of important and enactments. Following the same feat, this Law Commission of India has issued the questionnaire. It is conducting public consultations on the Uniform Civil Code. We as a political party, as a youth political group, we thought that it is our duty to amplify the government's work, to conduct more consultation, and we are doing the Vijaybhoomi public consultation on the Uniform Civil Code. In this consultation, we have taken the pressing issue, the questions, and there is a space for your answers. There are some objective type questions, there are some subjective questions. Now we'll be doing these consultations for the next 10 days more, and we'll be compiling a report and presenting it to the government. So for that particular thing, I'll share a form with Kritika ji, and in the link here is as well. I will request all of you to participate in that consultation. It will hardly take 5 to 10 minutes of your time. You will also get some information on that particular question and that particular issue. And you are most welcome to suggest any views, pro or against, but anything that you are suggesting, we request that it should come from some knowledge of that issue or some experience. So this was from my side. Thank you for the fantastic panel and the amazing event, Kritika ji. And I am very eager to listen to the views of our participants from the other side.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for putting, putting everything in perspective. We've had a very extensive discussion. And thank you for letting us know that everybody who's joining in can also participate and, put forth their views as long as it's backed by reason about what they feel about all of these aspects that we've spoken today. So I would like to request if somebody can just put in that link of the questionnaire in the Zoom chat box, so that a lot of the people who are attending, they can also attend to this questionnaire as well as circulate it to others who might be interested. Also, if possible, since we are running short of time, if there's any email ID where they can send their detailed views, which they may have apart from the questionnaire, also, if you would like to put that in, so that, if there's any follow-up point or a question that they had at the end of this discussion, they can take it up there and we will be more than happy to engage with them. So I know we have exceeded time like anything, but I think it's been such a wonderful conversation. I think from a moderator's point of view, I had a great time listening to everything that all the panelists had to say. Yes, at certain points, the lawyer in me was also itching to add a couple of points and perspectives as well. But I think there was a brilliant panel that we had in terms of, reflecting the very many diverse views. And I feel that, we've given a lot of food for thought to our attendees. And I hope all of you go back standing enriched in terms of knowledge on this issue. And we would like to request you, the idea of these discussions is for you to be able to also multiply the knowledge. Please take these conversations at home, take these conversations with your friends, with your business colleagues, so that we can truly spread awareness and truly empower people to ask the right questions and have the right sort of ideas. So with that, I am seeing that there are a lot of comments that are there in the Zoom chat box, loving all the activity that is happening there. But unfortunately, we are up with time. So please make sure that you get in touch with us. Surashji, Mansaji, you want to put in any email ID where people can send in their views, their opinions. Please feel free to put that in the Zoom chat box. And now with that, I will have to hand the stage to Ms. Tanya Khanna. Thank you so much, Flo Amritsar, again. It's really been lovely moderating this discussion, and thank you so much for having us. Can I request the technical support to please unmute Ms. Tanya Khanna?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritika. Am I audible? Great. A very good evening to all our esteemed panelists. Just before I thank everyone, may I please request all the panelists to kindly switch on their cameras for a quick memory shot. Okay, cool. So I'm Tanya Khanna, Vice Chairperson, FICCI Flow Amritsar 23-24. And on behalf of the entire core committee, I would like to extend my gratitude to our dynamic chairperson, Himani Arora, Kritika Padode, our moderator. Thank you so much, Kritika, for bringing this insightful panel discussion to us at Flow. Thanks a ton. Mr. Suyash Pandey, Mr. Lakshay Mittal, Ms. Mansa Mohan, Dr. Surbhi Modi Sahai, Ravina Lalit, Jane Jain, and our very own Gen Z panelist, Zaina Dhillon. Thank you so much for this discussion, and I'm sure we all are going to look into the issues and also give us suggestions. Thanks, Kritika.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having us. A big thank you to all the panelists. Thank you so much, Flo, again. Thank you to the technical team for making sure that we've had a flawless webinar. And hopefully we'll have something soon again with Flow Amritsar, and we'd love to engage with all of you again. Thank you and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.